Okay, my name is Christian Luzon. I'm a summer 2013 intern with AC Trees, and it is Wednesday, August 21st, 2013, and it's 5:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm here talking with Pepper Provenzano. Thank you so much, Pepper, for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
So I guess we'll just jump right into it if that's okay. And I know we have some questions for you. So I guess first thing we were interested in asking, um, what were things like for urban forestry nonprofits, and moreover, the field of urban forestry when AC Trees was conceptualized in 1992?
Well, in 1992, there were already a number of well-established urban organizations that were working in urban forestry that were some of the pioneers. Um, Primarily the national organizations, American Forests was had been involved with urban forestry for some time. Trees Atlanta had started up a year or two, maybe three before. Um, Kirk Brown's organization, the Tree Trust in Minneapolis, which I believe was the first urban forestry organization in the country. I'm not certain about that. You can double check. Um, Twin Cities Tree Trust, it was called at the time, and uh, the federal government was becoming aware that a number of startups were beginning around the country. Um, I started Tree Utah in '88, and it became formalized as an nonprofit 501c3 in '90. So, some people say an organization starts when it's an official 501c3, but of course there are hundreds of organizations out there planting trees that are in the process of becoming nonprofits. They're viable as well. So, um, that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And I guess going off of that, a little broader question. Why did you think that there was a need for an organization like AC Trees? And what's the overall importance of building a national network that connected local groups?
Well, at the time we were some 16, less than 20, I think, urban forestry organizations established in mostly major metropolitan areas in '92. But dozens and dozens more were coming on quickly. And, we were suddenly discovering that we had a flock that we could fly with, compare notes with, hopefully leverage um, our unity uh, and strength, and to wake up more um, of the country, wake up the federal government as well to and the municipal governments, because there was a lot of um, fertile ground to cultivate and a lot of research that needed to be done in urban forestry. And the government was very interested in supporting research, and they were interested in what we were doing in major metropolitan areas as well as small towns around the country.
Um, and so, were there other national organizations involved in urban forestry and community greening?
Yes, so where American Forest was a primary one that was starting to work with the members of Alliance for Community Trees, along with the federal government's support to actually initially bring us together for meetings, which is what they began funding for this loose collective of executive directors of nonprofit urban forestry organizations. Um, what else? I mean, you wind me up here. I can talk for hours, Christian. Uh, all of us felt very passionate about what we were doing because we were basically building blocks from with little experience, little solid research and information to go on. But the passion would grow on us because the work we were doing would resonate with the public in the communities that we lived in. Uh, and it was doing environmental work when environmental work was not always very popular, but no one could argue with urban forestry and teaching environmental stewardship. It was very non-controversial, sort of a win-win for population centers around the country. So it was easy for people to be supportive of, and that, of course, um, only fueled the fire of our enthusiasm.
Um, and so, how did you decide on the mission of AC Trees, and what do you think sets it apart from similar organizations?
Remind me of the mission, Christian. You have it handy?
Sure.
I
Um,
should know it by heart, but it's been so many years and I've been out of the organization.
so I want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
giving you the right thing.
click on
Um,
it right there.
so, um, direct you to the website. Um, AC Trees is a vital and growing national movement to improve the environment in our communities, one tree at a
Now you
time.
want the mission now.
Yeah, we support grassroots, citizen-based nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to urban and community tree planting, care, conservation, and education. And then there's an annual report and 5-year strategic plan, which is all available on the website.
All right. Well, I would say ACT has been true to its mission, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Um, the problem is that there's so much that needs to be done, and we have still, in my opinion, only scratched the surface of waking up what I call the sleeping giant of the American public to the importance of their their support and their involvement locally in urban and community forestry, planting and maintenance and education, stewardship,
Um,
and as many of us have learned who have been executive directors of these nonprofit or local nonprofit organizations, uh, there are just never enough funds for the scope of the work that needs to be done. And city budgets for urban forestry, municipal budgets are almost without exception paltry. And the federal government uh, still doesn't recognize that urban areas are where the majority of the human um, human wealth in terms of people power as well as money, and as well as votes
um,
exists. And I think that's because the federal government has been so entrenched um, in traditional forestry, in how its structure has long been established. But so so our work is very much as necessary as ever, and um, money is always a difficult issue, as well as expanding recognition that would wake up the philanthropic center to support um, local urban forestry organizations. It's changing, but it seems slow to change.
So were there contentious issues when you were setting up the organization that had to be decided upon?
Well, I mean, policy making is always, as they say, um, like legislation. Building policy and legislation is like sausage making. It's can be pretty ugly sometimes and contentious. The end product may be delicious, but and work out well, but uh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of detail to work through, and agreement on just who this should be for, whether it should be ACT should be primarily to support just the work of the executive directors, or the work of the local nonprofit sector only, or to what degree that ACT should partner with trade organizations and other organizations that work to further like kind goals. All that had to be worked through, and some of that may still be in contention among your members.
Um, and so when you became involved, what were your initial personal goals, and what were some of your larger goals for AC Trees as a whole?
Well, personally, I felt that I had some, you know, strong interest in information packaging because of my vocation as a journalist and an editor, and I felt that technology was becoming extremely important. I saw that very early on, hence the establishment of TreeLink. And because I felt that education, dissemination, and reaching out to awaken the public was were two huge objectives that needed to be worked towards. As far as ACT is concerned, I felt that it could be extremely helpful in, of course, unifying our voice, representing the local organizations with um, with partner organizations and with uh, funding mechanisms as well, that we might have more strength to get funding and education support um, from the philanthropic center, the philanthropic sector, excuse me, as well as the corporate sector. If we had a unified organization that would work on behalf of, again, that would work on behalf of the local organizations.
Um,
It goes back to the acorn that you want to think globally, but the rubber meets the road locally. Think globally and act locally. So I saw ACT as having a critical um, station as a nexus for the local organizations.
and did you think that the organization would end up growing to the extent that it has today?
Well, as a matter of fact, Christian, I once came back after speaking in as a keynote speaker at the European Urban Forest Conference, um, and took like 5 flights to get back to an ACT board meeting in Atlanta, Georgia. Little did I realize the effect of um, 2 days travel, um, and in a very emotional, let's say in a very emotional statement, I actually spoke out and said that I didn't envision myself being with ACT for much longer, um, because I thought I'd be moving on to other things. But I envisioned that there would be an ACT meeting someday where 500 local organizations would be represented. I said that at that time, and I think I think I was looked upon as um, having lost my mind. But I still feel strongly that one, ACT can have that future, should have that future, and two, that you should never ever attend an important board meeting after you've been on planes for 2 days, traveling in the opposite direction. I guess I didn't have jet lag. I had reverse jet lag, which they say hits you approximately 48 hours later.
Oh no. Um, well, I guess another thing that's interesting. Uh, what do you think might be the most important thing that AC Trees has done that you know of?
Well, certainly bringing the groups together annually is important. I just would rather that we were not at all dependent on, or excuse me, only partially uh, dependent on government support, as in with any diverse funding base. I'd like to see more corporate support. I'd like to see I'd like to see across the board all the classic funding mechanisms, right down to items for sale, on the website. I'd like to see more use of the technology, of course. Um, I appreciate and read the newsletters that ACT sends out. Um, I guess I'm just hungry for a lot more to happen. But I've done my part, as a number of executive directors who have retired and moved on have done their part, and times are changing. You guys will come up with newer technology that you'll be using, and greater things are in the work in the future, I think. I still consider ACT in some of its early formative years, that before a major breakthrough happens, that I hope will happen for ACT and the local organizations. Um, what else? I think that adding all of the um, um, contact information and the um, items that were in TreeLink into the ACT website, hopefully strengthened that up, bolstered it some. I think that information sharing, particularly regarding research, is extremely important, and you guys are helping to make that happen. Also, your spotlighting success stories of local organization, that's a very good thing. Those are all good things, and should continue.
Um, and
And there's lots of room for creativity.
yeah. Um, so I guess going off of that, um, what did you take away from the experience, and in what ways did AC Trees support your organization? Do you think that that's changed or grown over the years?
Hmm. Say that again.
So, what did you take away personally from your experience with AC Trees? And Do you think that AC Trees, do you think that they continue to support your organization? And do you think that that support has changed or grown over the years?
Well, I don't know to what extent ACT is supporting Tree Utah because I've long since let the reins of that go
Hmm.
and moved on, focused on TreeLink. As for TreeLink, um, I don't know if you folks want to hear this. I'm very disappointed that you haven't taken advantage of the tool that was created in the iTreeBank system that showed so much problem. Excuse me, did I say problem? Oh boy. That showed so much promise. Um, and I just don't know what the problem was with that. So I haven't spoken with Carrie in some time about it. The last I heard, she was planning on ramping that up, but um, I haven't seen it happen. Um, but ACT was supportive of True Utah while I was helping to develop both organizations. Um, it cannot continue to support TreeLink since TreeLink doesn't actually exist anymore as an organization, as a nonprofit organization. The tools of which have all gone to ACT. I've retired and moved on to other projects.
Um, and so, how did your involvement in AC Trees, do you think, impact your overall career in urban environmentalism?
Oh, well, I've written about this. Working for a nonprofit organization gives rewards and volunteerism as well, give rewards that no dollar amount, you, that just um, transcend um, so much that you can't receive without um, being involved in. Boy, I'm not articulating this too well. I should think about that because I have to say that while it was not, I never felt like I should get a much monetary reward for the work that I did in urban forestry. I wasn't in it for the money, as most people working for nonprofits are not in it for the money. But I traveled around the country and I traveled around the world, meeting some extraordinary people from all many of the states and the state conferences that I was a speaker at, to the United Nations conferences that I spoke at, to um, urban forestry conferences in other parts of the world. I mean, it was extremely rewarding to see what research was developing and being put to practical use in cities and towns, and over a long period of time to see the trees actually grow and whole neighborhoods where we planted um, that are so you know the unnatural urban environment of impervious surfaces and heat islands so changed by the leaf mass, the shade, and all the myriad benefits of trees in communities that we now know science is um, showing more than anecdotally uh, have um, have a very big impact on our lives. Of course, as we always said, it doesn't take a weather vane to know which way the wind blows.
Um, and I guess going off of that, I know you just, touched on this a lot in your last answer, but how do you think AC Trees has impacted the general field of urban forestry and moreover the urban forestry movement?
Well, some people have said you shouldn't call it a movement, but I always felt it was. ACT has certainly raised the profile of and name recognition of the term urban and community forestry and the organizations which are its members. Um, as far as the movement is concerned, I think that it's brought a lot of young members into the fold and gotten them up to speed in what urban forestry is about and the benefits of it. So it's been very powerful in an educational sense. And my takeaway is simply a great deal of respect and affection for all of the people who toil in this endeavor, as well as ACT for any and all support it brings to the table.
Um, what do you see as the most important functions, or if you wanted to call it roles of AC Trees today?
Um, Education outreach, one. Uh, I'd like to see corporate, well, you know, I, I think because education outreach is such a major, to such a major degree, what the organizations do. Because every time you go to a funder, every time you go to a new person, a new volunteer, we spend so much of our time in education. So I'll say education outreach, education outreach, education outreach, first, second, and third. Leveraging technology from ACT to better um, share success stories um, and reach out to media, corporate support, corporate potential supporters, and the philanthropic sector to provide education to all three and to urge them to support not only ACT, but to support the local organizations where the rubber meets where again the rubber meets the road, where the highest degree of impact, um, uh, long-term impact is achieved. So again, education, education, education. Always leveraging technology as far as possible to reach out faster and farther, to enlighten and educate not just the public, but the corporate sector, the philanthropic sector, um, and uh, and the media that can also help expand corporate outreach. excuse me, expand educational outreach.
Um, so, what do you see as the future of AC trees?
That's a pretty big question there, Christian.
Just, you can answer that however you want. I guess, if you want me to rephrase it, um, what do you see now that AC's Trees is doing that you think is, do you think that's going to play out over the long term? And so, if you mentioned education, a lot in the last question, if you think that's an important role or the most important role of the organization today, do you think that that function is going to, improve in the future? And so I guess that's kind of how I meant to take that.
Well, first of all, let me clarify that I don't necessarily mean just traditional education. I mean, environmental stewardship, education, and outreach is something that ACT has the ability to combine with uh, technology and social mediums to um, to um, again, I'm going back to that original goal of waking up the sleeping giant of the public. Because when the public wakes up and really it becomes a tip of the tongue for people all across the country and around the world, then the philanthropic center hears it. They support it more. And the government simply does not have the money to fund urban forestry to the level that it needs to be funded locally. I mean, I would like to see endowments established for urban forestry nonprofit organizations in every major metropolitan area. And and I think that we now have the technology tools to do this. Um, but not enough people are aware. And so that's the kind of education I'm talking about, is somehow reaching the public better, reaching the corporate sector better, reaching the philanthropic sector better um, to somehow monetize urban forestry in such a way that you know um, people everywhere recognize that it's not just a nice to have, but something that um, must have support.
Um, that was pretty much,
Because there's a Christian, there's an
yeah.
old saying, um, no margin, no mission. And I know that many nonprofit organizations have gone out of business because their managers were not great business managers and didn't raise a lot of money. I think I'm somewhat of an example of that myself. I didn't like the idea of having to spend so much of my time um, educating, shall we say, corporate potential funders and the philanthropies that had never heard of urban forestry. Um, and that's tough when I'd rather have been planting trees with people the majority of my time and caring for trees and and assessing, using the research to assess that so many of which these tools exist now to assess urban forests and um, we nearing the end here?
Well, that was actually the last question that I had for you, but you
Good. I
know,
hope I haven't bent your ear too much here.
no, no, no. I really appreciate. I got a lot out of this, and I thought you had some really interesting things to say. Um, are there any other just general things you want to talk about, or do you have any final thoughts on AC Trees or anything that you'd like to say just about yourself or your career. Um,
Well, it's been deeply rewarding. It just comes a time if you have other things in your life that you want to turn your attention to that you do. I spent 20 years in journalism, and I spent, I believe, 24 years in urban forestry. So, um, I look back with no regrets whatever, uh, except possibly that I would have liked to have seen some of my programs that I designed from nothing uh, go further and carry on. And but new people have new ideas, and that's the way of the world. So you do put in your time, and you do the best you can, and uh, with new energy, new blood, come new ideas, and good things always sprout from that as well. So gotta stay
well,
optimistic.
um, thank you again so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Well,
Again, I really have to
thank
say
you,
I got a
Christian,
lot of, yeah.
and thanks to ACT too.
And yeah, thank you so much. I've really got a lot out of this. So thank you again, Pepper. And that's what we have. So thank you again.
All right, moving on. You're moving on yourself, so good luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
Take care.
adios.